Y'all know what time it is.
We've been fighting. If you go back to that picture, you remember the picture of the Morris Zionist Jews? Yeah, the one the dude that had the hand on the Bible one. Okay, so if you pull that picture up and put a picture of Harriet Tubman, them her people. I can see it. Them her people.
But actors.
But now they gotta remember, it's about control and propaganda warfare. It's about control of the narrative, the story that's being given. The only way to unravel if it's true or not is to apply the testing of logic, and it don't match up. How was she freeing slaves in 1889 when Lincoln already freed the slaves 6 years earlier?
They
ran that. Go ahead, Ron. That's the same as we know about Nat Turner from a book called The Confessions of Nat Turner. Yeah. The book is listed under fiction.
Happy Black History Month. She's tied to the Zionist Jews. She's tied to the actors. Did you know Harriet Tubman was a part of the military, the U.S. Army? How is you part of the U.S. Army, trained soldier, spy, and you help free our people at the same time? Happy Black Fallacy Month. She didn't exist.
Now let's get into it, because more than one thing can absolutely be true at the same damn time. Y'all do this with the Bible. Y'all do this with the Bible. Y'all want to throw the whole book away because we've been lied to about the stories in the book. The world has been given over to a strong delusion, but that doesn't mean the information is all false. Now, I don't know what y'all using y'all ChatGPT for, but if you look at the very bottom of your computer screen or your phone when you're making those images, those false images, it says ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check information. You can't check nothing if you don't have some of the truth or the whole truth. If you notice, if ChatGPT tells you something wrong and you don't know that it's wrong, you're just going to run with it. But if you know that it's wrong, you can correct it and it'll say, oh, you're absolutely right. My bad. So let's get into this story about Harriet Tubman, because some of the information that he gave is absolutely true, but we're not going to just go with, oh, this is true and this is not true, so the whole shit is, she's fake. Now, who's Harriet Tubman, really? Harriet Tubman was absolutely a real freedom fighter who personally helped enslaved people escape. I'm going to get to that part, because the reason why he's saying that, how can you help somebody, the whole Lincoln, we're going to get to that. That part is not a myth. She was a person, an abolitionist, that's someone who helps free slaves, a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She was a Union military scout and spy, a Civil War operative, and a raid leader who freed enslaved people. So, she did serve in a military role later, and she did directly help free enslaved people earlier. And she could have possibly still been in the military while still helping free slaves. Two things can be true at the same time. So, during the American Civil War, Tubman worked with the Union Army as a scout, a spy, a guide, a nurse, and intelligence gatherer. So she was a spy, y'all. She even helped lead an armed Union operation. It was called the Combahee River Raid that freed hundreds of enslaved people in South Carolina. She was the first woman in U.S. history to lead a military raid. Now, just because that is true, that doesn't absolutely cancel out her underground railroad work. It's a lot of tongue twisters up in here. You know what I'm saying? So, through the Underground Railroad, she made 13 rescue missions. And y'all, I think we get confused because a lot of these things have been tainted. And I'm just going to say this. The Underground Railroad and her freeing the slaves could possibly be confusing. Now, on this part of the video, I got a phone call and it messed up the audio, but only thing I was really saying here was kind of putting two and two together and saying that just because she brought them out of one captivity doesn't mean she didn't take them into another captivity, which was mental captivity. That's all I was saying. It wasn't nothing, no conspiracies in this silent part of the video, you guys. It just messed up because I got a phone call. I think also in this section I discussed her name and how she got her last name from her husband and her first name from her mother, I think. But yeah, her name was not originally Harriet Tubman. She changed it. there was no mass communication. They didn't have cell phones to tell everybody, hey, we're free, we're free, we're free. This information was hid. Just like in the 1970s when Haile Selassie was given free land to African Americans and other people from the African diaspora. A lot of people didn't know about that. And also, just like there were kings in Africa, Menelik to be exact, and I'll share that video in a minute.
So since it's so-called Black History Month, y'all, let's talk about it. Let's talk about some hidden black history. So here's a newspaper article, y'all. You know, you can zoom in, pause the video, check it out yourself. But I just pulled a little clip out to you. Let's just pay attention to this right now. Menelik has expressed a desire to have the Negroes from the southern states of America migrate and to settle in his country, and has promised them good treatment and every possible advantage. This is before what? The NFL? This is before NBA? This is before acting? This is before movies? This is before R&B, all the love songs, Soul Train, all this stuff that got us so attached to America. A black king was calling us back before we even. This is before all the industries. Matter of fact, let's let alone the entertainment. This is before the industries, before the good jobs, before you got to put your suits on and you was a proud American. This is before this. But check this part out. No exodus from the south to Abyssinia has yet to begun. Hold up. Why is this king talking about an exodus? He ain't connected to the Bible. He's just an old regular king. He just wear the title King of Kings and Lord of Lords because he liked the way it sounds. Why is he talking about an exodus? Now, in today's time, we are the only people that's telling you an exodus is about to take place and we are returning back to Abyssinia. I guess we might be ahead of our time, but you will see this in your generation. So bless those who have the eyes to see, bless those who have the ears to hear. And as always, I hope the Father has circumcised your hearts and ears for the message. Peace.
I just learned about that in 2026. So just imagine how it was back then. Everybody didn't know they were free, y'all. Just because the freedom happened 2 years prior to her going and freeing people doesn't mean that it didn't happen the way it happened. Everybody didn't know they were free. This is why Juneteenth exists. Let's talk about Juneteenth. On June 19, 1865, over 2 years later, Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and announced that enslaved people were free. Texas was one of the last Confederate areas with little Union presence, so thousands were still enslaved in practice until then. So the bottom line is, slavery didn't end everywhere all at once. Not everyone knew immediately. Harriet Tubman changed her name to Harriet Tubman. You know what I'm saying? So history is messier than the simplified version we usually get taught, but in this case, my instincts was right on point.
They're already divinely protected because their heart is in the right place. And that's what makes you divinely protected, if your heart is in the right place. And a lot of times it doesn't mean how much work you do in the community or how much you appear to be conscious. It's talking about your heart.
Another thing people say about Harriet Tubman is that she was an Eastern Star, which is the female version of a Mason. Okay? Now, they say that because I would probably think the same thing because they had similar roles like in society. Like one was they were both abolitionists, which means a person who worked to end slavery. But let's get into it. So, in short, she was not an Eastern Star. It is not historically supported to say that Harriet Tubman was probably an Eastern Star. There's no reliable historical records. That don't mean it's not true, but, we're just going to go with it. We know for certain Harriet Tubman is historically documented as a Underground Railroad conductor. She led the Underground Railroad thing. A Civil War scout, a spy. She was a spy. She was a nurse for the Union Army. She was a raid leader in the Combahee River Raid and a post-war humanitarian and suffrage supporter. Her military work was tied directly to the Union Army, not a fraternal order. So what's an Eastern Star? The Order of Eastern Stars is a Masonic affiliated fraternal organization open to women connected to Master Masons and later expanded eligibility. It was founded in the mid 1800s. It's not a military body and it's not a substitute for military service. While black fraternal organizations were very important in black civil life, mutual aid, and leadership networks, they were not the military and didn't function as such. So here's where the muddy waters come in, and people get watered down information. Some modern narratives assume many black leaders must have been Masons or Eastern Stars, secret societies equal hidden freedom networks, and fraternal groups automatically equal resistance structures. But historians rely on membership roll, lodge records, letters, and reports. Tubman's life is heavily documented, and Eastern Star membership has not been verified in credible records. So the bottom line is, it's accurate to say she worked with the Union military, she moved in activist and church networks, and she collaborated with abolitionists and officials. It's not accurate to say she was probably an Eastern Star. There's really no solid proof that she was an Eastern Star, guys. Okay? Now, I know what you're saying. If they were both doing the same work, then they were both probably a part of the same organizations. But we got to look at this. In black communities in the 1800s, early 1900s, leadership often came from the same spaces: churches, abolitionist circles, mutual aid societies, fraternal lodges, educators, military veterans, and civic organizations. So the same causes were supported by abolitionists, black churches, Masonic lodges, women's aid societies, and suffrage groups. That's not a coincidence. That's coalition. Okay? So think of it like this. Supporting the same cause does not automatically equal belonging to the same organizations. To put it simple, so you can understand what I'm saying, two nonprofits and a veterans group might all support housing reform, but that doesn't mean every reform leader belongs to all three. You know what I'm saying? All right, so Nat Turner. Let's talk about Nat Turner. Nat Turner was not fake, guys. We can't just throw the whole story out because there's some information that's confusing or doesn't actually look like. When you use look, let's just get into it. I'm not going to go. The claim that Nat Turner wasn't real is false. He was a real historical person, and the rebellion he led is one of the most documented slave uprisings in U.S. history. The confusion usually comes from mixing up a fiction novel. That part is true. There is a fiction novel with the actual historical records. So there are actual historical records. And most of y'all didn't know that it was actually 2 books written about Nat Turner. So Nat Turner led an uprising in Southampton County, Virginia in 1831, the Revolt. It involved dozens of enslaved people, resulted in deaths of about 55 white residents. It triggered massive retaliation and led to stricter slave laws across the South. It intensified national tensions over slavery as well. There are official legal proceedings documenting this capture, trial, and execution, guys. So this information, y'all, I done recorded this twice. I'm not starting over. This information is supported by court records, trial transcripts, newspaper reports from 1831, government documents, eyewitness testimony, execution records. This is not a legend. It's archived history. Now, just because he's telling the story doesn't mean the whole story is false. You don't just get a lie from nowhere. You get a lie from the truth. Now, I want to ask y'all something. Where are the witnesses and the archives about the 2,000-year-old Jesus? Were there any witnesses? Because these things, eyewitness testimonies. But, we ain't going to talk about that. Now, right after this revolt, a lawyer by the name of Thomas R. Gray published a pamphlet called The Confessions of Nat Turner. This is important. It is represented as Turner's dictated confession, but Gray wrote and edited himself. Historians debate how accurate it is. It is a primary historical source, not labeled fiction, but it's treated cautiously. When I start using logic, common sense, and truth in spirit, all together, we might get somewhere.
Come on, let's go. Welcome to the United Snakes, land of the thief, home of the slave. Grand Imperial Guard, where the dollar is sacred and proud. Let's do the shit for real. Come on now. Smoke and mirrors, stripes and stars. Stolen for the cross in the name of God. Bloodshed, genocide, rape and fraud. Written to the pages of the law, good law.
Peace to the real.